Broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Hello, and thank you for joining SIS today for our webinar, Year-End Closing in Dynamics SL. My name is Eric Petrocelli, Marketing Coordinator with SIS. SIS has been helping the Dynamics SL community unify business processes and applications across the enterprise for over 20 years and offers services around training, support, upgrades, cloud migration, and business process reviews. Before we get started, a few housekeeping items. The webinar today is being recorded, and we're going to send out a copy via email. All lines are muted, and if you have any technical difficulties, email info@sisn.com for assistance. We're going to have a Q&A session at the end, and we'll be able to answer any questions then. And with that, I would like to introduce you to our speaker today, Amy Junkins. Amy, thanks for taking the time to talk to us today about year-end closing. The floor is yours.
Absolutely, I'm glad. Absolutely, I am glad to be here and be speaking about some of these year-end issues so that this goes as smoothly as possible for everyone. So our agenda today is going to be talking about year-end updates, what's available, and what kind of changes occurred this year over last year. Also, just general year-end processing and closing topics for payroll, accounts payable, general ledger, project controller, and then a quick miscellaneous at the end. So Microsoft has provided year-end updates for AP and payroll for all versions, so all levels of Dynamics SL 2018. One big tip to remember is if you do use payroll, don't apply the year-end updates until after you have finished and closed your payroll for 2022. So the updates for accounts payable from Microsoft include an updated 1099 NEC form, the calendar year format needed modified, an updated 1099 miscellaneous form with some rearranging needed for the additional TIN checkbox and box number 13, the modified calendar year format, and needing to move around the account number. For payroll, the only change was an updated W-2 4-up form to rearrange boxes to correspond to some IRS requirements. When you are applying year-end updates, that link at the top is where you can download them from. You want to make sure that you've made a backup. So since this affects AP, payroll, and reporting, in case you have custom reporting, you want to make a backup of your AP folder, your PR, your payroll folder, and you use a reports folder where custom reports are stored. And as a precaution, you do want to make a backup of your application and system databases. Some of the versions contain SQL changes, and some of the versions do not. So it really depends on what version you're on whether each of these is strictly necessary, but as a best practice, back them up and you are extra safe. So within those downloads, you would need to identify what is your exact version of Dynamics SL 2018. You can find that out by logging into Dynamics and then going to Help about Microsoft Dynamics SL. And for example, if your version starts with 10.01, then you're on SL 2018 CU1, and so on. So those year-end updates exist for all of the versions through CU8. CU9 was just also released, and it actually includes the year-end updates. So you'd choose the relevant update in the download package, and there is a PDF included with specific instructions. It is a really good idea to check afterwards to make sure that the proper files were updated. There is an appendix in the PDF that will identify for your version which files should have been updated. So you can use that to cross-check. Now, if you are on an earlier version of Dynamics SL, so 2011 or 2015, or you are running 2018 and have no maintenance plan with Microsoft, Solomon Cloud Solutions is offering an AP-only year-end update package for all levels of those 3 versions. You get an updated 1099 form reports, both the NEC and the miscellaneous, an updated 1099 electronic file generation, a brand new 1096 report, and screen updates so that your box numbers and labels in the various screens that show 1099 box numbers display properly. If you're interested in more information about that, please contact Debbie, the email address shown, and she will assist. Another year-end update for payroll is tax table updates. So the IRS makes changes to the levels at which each tax rate applies, and sometimes the tax rate. And then some states also make changes. So that URL is where you can go to see what the existing current ones are. The mid-December updates in file named tax update 123122.zip have been available as of 12/18/2022. However, the government has actually published changes to that since then, which is pretty typical. And so the mid-January updates should contain those updates. And so you might want to think about if you need to reach out to someone to load those for you. Many customers skip the December ones and just wait for the January ones rather than spending the time loading both the December and then also the January. You can cut checks without having the new updates applied because the changes are typically very small and aren't going to impact your employees' withholding amounts, especially when you consider it would only apply for 1 to 2 payroll runs compared to the whole year. Again, if you need to clarify that or make sure of that, consult your tax professional for advice. So we're going to talk about year-end topics in payroll. So how do you close payroll? How do you verify everything's ready? So make sure you've entered all data. You've cut all of your payroll checks for the year, and you've committed them. Review your payroll batch register for the entire year, if possible, and make sure that all of your batches have been released within payroll and also posted to the GL. You want to tie your payroll reports to your payroll accounts in GL, and you can use the account distribution report, the GL trial balance report, the 941 quarterly tax return, the unemployment tax return, and the earnings and deductions report to help you with that. Once you're done verifying everything's been entered and all your reports tie out, it's time to run through your W-2 calculations. So you can run your W-2 calculation as many times as needed. It does include inactive employees. And then you'd want to print your W-2 forms to plain paper. If you see any issues, you're going to want to think about, okay, is it a federal, a state, or a tax issue? And typically you're going to see your problems crop up with the way your earnings types are set up. Sometimes your deductions, are things exempted and shouldn't be, or are not exempted and should be. And then if it's a tax amount problem, try to break it down into federal, state, or local. So once you've identified what the number should be, you can edit your W-2 data in the employee W-2 history screen using initialize mode. But be cautious about that. If you've found the issue, it's best to fix the setup problem and rerun the W-2 calculation, because that will prevent you from experiencing that problem again in 2023 down the road. So once you have all your numbers verified, then go ahead and print your W-2s 2 forms. You can use copy D instead of copy 1 or 2. Dynamics SL contains the standard 2-part form or a 4-part, or some people call it 4-up form. You can obtain pre-printed forms from Deluxe or most local office supply stores. You can, instead of using pre-printed forms, print your own forms using copies A, B, C, and D. However, you need to know that copy A must be printed in red scannable ink. Once you've printed your forms, then you'll go on and generate the electronic file from the Generate W-2 electronic file screen. You'll need to input the transmitter pin that you received from the SSA and your contact information so they know who to contact if there are issues with the file. Once your W-2s are done, then go ahead and close Payroll. Instead of choosing period for the closing type, you'll choose year. And if you accidentally close too soon, then it can be reopened through SQL updates. And if you don't have someone on staff that's practiced with that, then reach out to your partner to reopen it. One of the most common issues we see at the end of the year when people are running their first payroll for the next year is that when they're trying to do a calculation, they get system message 6960. Check date calendar year cannot be changed. And this is because you still have an unfinished calculation for 2022 that you need to clear. So you can use the employees quick query, searching for any employees where the current check calculated column is equal to 1. And you want to write down the pay group ID, beginning date, and ending date. And then use that information to clear the calculation in calculation. And then you'll be able to proceed and calculate your new check run in 2023. So now on to accounts payable closing topics. To close accounts payable, we'll verify that all recurring entries are generated and released. Make sure that all entries in general are released and also posted to the GL for both purchasing, if you use it, and AP for the year. So use the AP batch register to help you with that. You want to verify that your reports tie out. So your period sensitive aged AP report matches your vendor period trial balance. And your GL trial balance matches your detailed GL report for your AP account or accounts. And then that your period sensitive aged AP matches your GL trial balance for your AP account. When you're ready, go ahead and close AP, choosing a closing type year in the GL closing screen. And like payroll, what if you accidentally close too soon? It can be reopened via SQL. So then you'll run through processing your 1099s if you have 1099 vendors. So print your 1099 preview report, print the 1099 NECs to forms and distribute them, the miscellaneous to forms and distribute, and generate your 1099 electronic file if you want to submit electronically to the IRS. You'll also then want to close your 1099 year, purging your 2021 data, making sure you roll 2022 to your current year and 2023 to your next year. So you do that by choosing Process option, Purge Oldest Year, and clicking Begin Processing. An overview, again, of the tax year updates for the 1099s, layout changes, box number description tweaks, no electronic file changes. So if you generated electronic files last year, the format should work for you this year with no issues. Some of the biggest questions I see around 1099s are actually problems with the calculation. But first, I see, one of the things people run into usually during the first week of the year is when they are trying to cut their very first payroll check of 2023. When they put that check date in to the AP check screen, they'll receive a system message 532, date must be in an open 1099 year. And that's because they haven't closed the calendar year yet in the 1099 calendar year control. That's these screens here. Okay. But what if you close the calendar year one too many times and you've purged 2022? How do you print your 1099s? Two options: restore from a backup of the database, or you can use SQL. Those 1099 years can be reopened, and depending on your version, you might need a tweak to correct a bug, and then you can run the rebuild 1099 year option in the AP integrity check. What if you set up the vendor as a 1099 vendor, but after you'd already entered and paid some vouchers for them, either some or all of their vouchers? If you want to, you can calculate the number it should be and turn on initialize mode. And in vendor maintenance on the 1099 info tab, you can manually input that total. And then it'll print on your preview and forms just fine. Or you can use SQL to go back to those vouchers and update those vouchers with the box numbers, and basically run the rebuild 1099 year in the AP integrity check to calculate those totals for you. So remember that 1099s and W-2s actually also are based on the check date. So it doesn't actually matter which period or which date the voucher or the invoice was entered for. It's when did you pay that? So what check date did you pay that voucher in? What can you do to prepare in advance? Use the 1099 preview report, which includes all vendors that are marked as 1099 vendors, regardless of the amount, the total, calculated for them. The actual 1099 form itself excludes those vendors that have under a $600 total, or whatever limit you've specified in the limit box in AP Setup. And again, can the 1099 amounts be changed? So yes, you can use initialize mode like we discussed earlier and manually enter the correct total on the vendor. Or if you want to dig into why, you can, if you have IT staff or your partner, to look at those documents and possibly update those documents with totals. So general ledger. Release and post all your batches, all your recurring, all your allocations, and for not just GL, but all your subledgers. So use your batch register reports. Close all your subledgers for the year in GL closing. Verify that your GL trial balance matches your detailed GL report. Ideally, you're going to back up the database. and then close GL choosing closing type year. And again, what if you accidentally close too soon? It can be reopened. Contact your partner. Now you can, if you need to, post things backwards into closed periods and or closed years, depending on your settings. So you may have settings in GL Setup on the Posting Options tab, or in a third-party application like Hard Close that help prevent you from doing that normally, but they can be overridden temporarily in situations. You don't necessarily need to reopen a closed period if you've just got one or two things you need to post backwards. Project series. So closing project. So project closing comes after you've closed all your financial modules. You want to review time cards, expense reports, approve and post them if needed. Run through your labor commitment load, your GL labor posting, pay labor interface, financial transaction transfer, FTT, revenue recognition, allocation processor, and billing transaction load, and complete your invoicing and flexible billings. You'll want to review your project list for open projects and double check that projects that are going to stay open have the right option chosen for their balance forward at year end. So if you have that box unchecked, that means do not carry the balance forward. Your ending balance is going to reset and your beginning balance will be zero for the next year. If you have it selected, that means carry your current balances forward. So your budget numbers, your actuals as well. And when you're ready then, go ahead and use Project Controller's close period to close the year. A normal period close, that button down at the bottom that says begin year-end close, would actually be a period close. The label on that changes, so you do know when you're at a year end. What if you get any warnings or errors when you're closing? Warnings are just that, warnings. You can either correct them or ignore them at your discretion. Errors, however, must be corrected prior to closing. And so if you're not sure, if it's not clear to you what the message is telling you, then contact your partner for assistance. And what do you do if you close the year too soon? Or you need to change the project's balance, one or more projects balance forward setting. So this you can do yourself. You don't have to do it via SQL. You would go into Project Controller Setup and change your current period back to your December period. You would process whatever transactions are missing or change the project's balance forward settings, and then use the close period screen again to reclose the year. You want to be very careful. Do not use Project Controller Setup to change the period forward again, because it will not actually roll your balances forward. It will not take those changes that you made and apply them to the current year. So when you're done closing Project Controller, you want to verify that you've got your fiscal period set up in Project Controller's fiscal period maintenance. You want to verify that you've set up week ending dates for 2023 in week maintenance. If you've got the older version of the screen, you'll need to enter them manually. Or, if you've got some of the very latest versions, there are some generation selection options up there at the top that can help generate those for you in the grid. And if you do use Sandler Kahn's Global e-banking suite, then update your bank holidays screen with the list of the bank's observed banking holidays. And that is the end of the topics that I had prepared. Are there any questions?
Thanks, Amy, for a great presentation. Joining us with Amy for our Q&A is Dynamics SL Service Delivery Manager, Katrina Harris. The first question that we have that has come in is, if SIS is doing the updates, who makes the backup? Katrina?
Okay, you had me muted. I'm like, I can't get off of mute. Good afternoon, everyone. We can do that either way. I think the question is, who does the backup, whether it's the SIS staff or your internal IT staff? It just depends. If you do have someone in your IT department that is responsible for or who regularly handles your backups, then we can certainly coordinate with them and ask them to pull a backup for us. But our staff is able to do that backup as well. So that would be just on a case-by-case basis.
Thanks, Katrina. If anybody has any questions, please put them in the chat.
Yeah. And I just wanted to take this opportunity also, while folks are putting their questions together, just to reiterate that SIS is available to do your year-end updates. We have several staff members that can log into your system, make sure that your backup is in place, and coordinate the year-end updates when your users are out of the system, and make sure that you have those updates in place in time to meet your deadlines for your 1099 processing, as well as your W-2 if you are a payroll customer. So you would just send an email to assist@sisn.com. And if you would put year-end updates or payroll tax updates in the subject, just to kind of identify what the case is about, and we will get your case set up. You'll receive a confirmation, and then we'll get it assigned to one of our team members for update. Do you have any other questions coming in, Eric?
No, that looks like it's it. If anybody has any other questions, please email info@SISN or Debbie PV at dpv@sisn.com. We want to thank you for joining today, and thank you, Amy, for taking the time to speak with us. And hope everybody has a great day. Thanks.
Thanks, Amy. Thanks, everyone.